Hi everybody and welcome back to BeginnerJS. I'm Abrar and I'm going to be your instructor for this video. And in this video, we're going to be talking about numbers. Now numbers, just like strings, are a very important data type in JavaScript and they're widely used, so it's important that you know what numbers are and how they work. So let's jump right in. Okay, so we're talking about numbers here. So what are numbers in JavaScript and how are they used? Well, numbers represent numerical values in JavaScript, which means you can use numbers to represent, well, numbers inside JavaScript. So why do you need them? Well, in programming languages, you often have to work with numbers, because numbers and numerical calculations are very common in programming. And that's why you need a way of representing numbers inside JavaScript. So you need a numbers data type, and that's exactly what JavaScript has. Just like strings, JavaScript has a numbers data type which are used to represent numbers or numerical values. Now, unlike strings, numbers are written as is, which means we don't need any quotation marks or anything else around them. You just write the number as is, and that's all. So unlike strings, JavaScript doesn't have a special way of actually writing numbers. You just write the number and JavaScript will treat it as a number. Now, one thing that you might be wondering here is that, well, if we have a string data type which is used to represent text, why do we need a separate numbers data type which is used to represent numbers? Because, well, you can write numbers inside strings, right? So you can technically create a string with a numerical value inside it. For example, you can write, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just wrap it around in a pair of quotation marks, and you'll create a string which contains numbers. So you can write numbers that way. Why do you need a different numbers data type? The reason for that is when you create a string that has numbers, JavaScript doesn't actually treat it as a number. It treats it as a string. And that means a lot of the things that you can usually do with numbers, for example, adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, and other mathematical calculations, can't be done on strings. For that, you need a different data type, which JavaScript calls numbers. So that's why, while you can write numbers as strings, they're not very useful, because JavaScript doesn't treat them as numbers and can't do a lot of things that you should be able to do with numbers. Now let's see an example of a number and how it's written inside JavaScript. Okay, so here we have a number. In this case, we just have a simple number 1, 2, 3, and then a semicolon to end the statement. And in this case, this number is an integer. Now in JavaScript, again, you can just write a number as is. You don't have to specify that it is a number or an integer or anything else. You just write the number as is, and JavaScript will create a number with that value. Now, in the first example, we had an integer or a whole number. However, JavaScript can also work with fractions or decimals. So in the second example here, we have another number. In this case, it is 154.48, and then a semicolon to end the statement. And in this case, this is a valid number as well. This number has a decimal, and in that case, JavaScript calls these numbers floating point numbers. So this number is a floating point number. Of course, JavaScript can also deal with negative numbers, or numbers that have a minus in front of them. So in this case, we have minus 17 or negative 17, and you can write it by first putting in a negative symbol or the minus sign, and then putting in the number. In this case, a negative sign or the minus sign, and then 17, and finally a semicolon to end the statement. And that's how you can create a negative number, in this case, negative 17. Now JavaScript has a special keyword named infinity, which is written with a capital I and with all other letters in lowercase. So in this case, infinity is actually a type of number as well. It has a numbers data type, so JavaScript treats infinity as a number. Now inside JavaScript, the keywords infinity and negative infinity are used to represent infinite values. So for example, you'll get the results infinity when you divide a number by 0. Now, if you have a value inside JavaScript, but you don't know what that value is or are not sure, you can use a type of operator to find out which data type the value belongs to. In JavaScript, the type of operator will tell you exactly what data type a certain value is. Now, in this example here, we have the code type of and then a string which contains the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a semicolon to end the statement. And now, as you can see on the right hand side in the comment, The output of this code is a string that contains the value string. And that's how you can use the type of operator. In order to find the data type of a certain value, you first type in the type of operator's name, so you write type of and then the value. In this case, a string which contains the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the output will be the data type of the value. Now in this case, as you can see, we have a string with a value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when we use the type of operator on this value, the result is a string, which means although we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the value, this value is still a string, and JavaScript treats it as a string. However, if you just type in the numbers as is without any quotation marks, then JavaScript creates a number and treats it as such. So in the second example, we have type of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without any quotation marks and then a semicolon to end the statement. And the result on the right hand side inside the comments, as you can see, is number. So in this case, JavaScript correctly tells us that the value of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a number because it doesn't have any quotation marks and it's not any other data type. So again, if you want to create numbers inside JavaScript, you just write them as is. However, if you write them inside strings, JavaScript will treat them as strings and not numbers. Now just like strings, numbers have a lot of properties and methods available to them. These properties are values that you can use, and the methods are functionality that is available to numbers. So just like strings, numbers have a lot of these properties and methods. In this video, we're going to be looking at some of them. First of all, we have the isFinite method. Now in JavaScript, the number object, which you can write as number with a capital N, has a lot of properties and methods available. One of them is the isFinite method, and you access it by typing in number.isFinite. So you type in number.isFinite, and then you have a pair of parentheses because it is a method, right? And in this case, the isFinite method can actually accept a parameter as a value. So here you can actually input a value inside the parentheses to be sent out as a parameter. And finally, we have a semicolon to end the statement. Now, as the name suggests, the isFinite method can tell you whether a number is finite or not. So in this case, isFinite 17 results in true because the number 17 is definitely finite. It's not infinite. So in this case, the value that you want to test for is actually inputted as a parameter inside the parentheses. So number.isFinite 17 means we want to find out whether 17 is finite or not. And in the result is true because 17 is indeed finite. If we input an infinite value, for example, by typing in number.isFinite and then inside the parentheses, instead of just inputting a number, what if we input an infinite value? We know that in mathematics, if we divide a number by 0, the result is infinity. So here, for example, we have 45 slash or divided by 0, which results in the value infinity. So in this case, number.isFinite, and we're passing the value 45 divided by 0 or 45 slash 0 inside the parentheses, and finally a semicolon to end the statement. And the result, as you can see on the right hand side, is false because 45 divided by 0 is infinity and that is not finite. So the isFinite method returns false. Another cool method is the isInteger method. The isInteger method can be used to check whether a value or a number is an integer or not. So in this case, number.isInteger 67.247 results in false because 67.247 is not an integer, it's not a whole number. If it was 67, then the isInteger method would have returned true. However, 67.247 means it's a decimal or a fraction number or a floating point number in JavaScript, and that's why the isInteger method returns false. So this method can be used to check whether a value or a number is an integer or a whole number or not. Now the number object has some properties available as well. One of them is a max value property, and you can access it by typing in number.max_value with max value written in uppercase. And the result is a very big value. As you can see, it is 1.797 ... e plus 108. So it is a number almost 1.8 multiplied by 10 to the 308th power. That is a very big number. And this is actually the maximum value that JavaScript can work with. So normally, JavaScript can't work with numbers bigger than this. This is the maximum possible numerical value that you can work with inside JavaScript. And we also have the min value property. And you can access it by typing in number.min_value with min value in all uppercase. And the result is 5e minus 324. And that is a very, very small number. In fact, it is the smallest positive number that you can work with inside JavaScript. And it is actually a very small number. So the max value and the min value properties can be used to access the maximum value and also the minimum or smallest positive value that you can work with inside JavaScript.